Index podcast is brought to you by our staking partner, Marinade Finance. Their latest release, Marinade Select, offers a smarter way to stake, featuring a curated set of high-performing mid-size validators handpicked for yield, professionalism, and their role in making Solana faster and more resilient. Learn more and start staking at marinade.finance. Hey everybody, welcome to the Index. I'm your host, Alex Kehaya, and today I am happy to be joined by Sam McIngvale. Did I say that right?
McIngvale, super close.
McIngvale. There's an A missing from this in my notes. McIngvale, sorry about that. Head of product at OP Labs, the team building Optimism, a protocol scaling Ethereum's tech and philosophy. I'm really familiar with Optimism from the early days, but I'm really excited to kind of learn more about what you've been up to, learn more about like the product, your role in product and everything like that. And also I noticed that you were head of product at Coinbase custody before this, which I think is super interesting. And I'd love to touch on that. But before all that, can you just tell me like, why are you here? Why are you getting out of bed in the morning to do this?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, Alex. Excited to be here. Maybe two threads here that I think led me to Optimism. The first is, for better or worse, worked in financial services and really like financial services infrastructure my whole career. So what is going on? This started with like equities trading and what goes on with the plumbing there. This then moved to custody at Coinbase and what goes on with the plumbing underneath institutional products in crypto that were needed to help bring institutions into the space. And that eventually led me to the actual protocol itself, or protocols itself, at Optimism. And I don't know that if many folks think about blockchains as financial infrastructure. I think one way you could think about them is that the primary brands, logos, institutions, whatever you want to call them, companies driving forward adoption of blockchains tend to have financial use cases. And blockchains are really just plumbing, they are just infrastructure to enable those financial use cases. And so that's just a consistent thread across my whole career. I'm excited to talk about our vision for how we view, the next wave of financial enterprise and financial institution adoption to look like on chain. The second thread is I kind of just like going deeper and deeper into the technology. So working in sort of like equities custody, it's like not really that complex. It's a lot of mainframes and not necessarily super interesting computer sciencey topics. Coinbase custody, like first step into a layer much deeper, which is a lot of cryptography, a lot of security to keep crypto assets safe. And now at Optimism, actually in the protocol itself. So kind of just continuing to go deeper into more technical spaces.
Yeah, and Optimism is kind of like a multi-chain stack for like launching your own L2, right? Like that's kind of, it's open source. And it's like all this suite of tools to make it easier to build your own L2s on top of Ethereum, right? Like, and there's this idea of a superchain. Like, can you just give me the high level pitch of Optimism and how it works? And also, is Base built on the OP stack?
Base is built on the OP stack. Yeah, Base
right.
is built on the Superchain as well. Let me give you like very brief history, and then I can leverage that or to explain sort of where we're at today. So Optimism started as an L2 on Ethereum. Back in the day, sort of like 2019, 2020, the thought was there's only going to need to be a couple L2s to scale Ethereum. They're all going to be 10x faster, 10x more throughput. And then very quickly, the team realized that like, no, there's not going to be like one canonical L2 to rule them all. There's actually going to be hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of L2s on Ethereum. And that is likely that is more likely to be the way that Ethereum scales and that lots of folks come on chain. So there was a slight pivot, which was let's take the underlying technology that powers Optimism, an L2 on Ethereum, and rebrand that as the OP stack. Let's turn that into an open source framework for anyone to come run an L2. So that shift happened 21, 22, sort of 23. We had the likes of Base come on and build on top of the OP stack. Today, there's quite a few more. I'll talk about some of those folks in a second. And more recently, this shift has been to the Superchain, which is sort of a collection of folks that run L2s using the OP stack that share revenue back with Optimism that enables us to more rapidly invest in the technology as well as the ecosystem to spur development and help everyone be successful.
Interesting. So do they share revenue back with Optimism Labs, like OP Labs, or is it a chain that like sort of like how gosh, now my mind is blanking. It starts with a P. The one chain that had like the ring or die architecture and like the spokes, where they had shared network security.
Yeah.
I'm feeling really dumb for forgetting which one it was, but yeah, like, is it like shared security on another chain?
I think of it a little bit as like there are some elements of shared security. The elements of shared security, though, are non-obvious and they're not necessarily crypto economic. So, really, what's happening is all of these chains that are in the super chains that just kind of go in order of notoriety. You'd have like Base, World Chain, Unichain, Inc., Sonium, a whole bunch more, Mode, Metal, Zora. All of them share on chain a portion of the revenue they take in from sequencer fees. And so this happens just via a series of contracts. It's all on chain. A portion of the revenue gets split out from their sequencer take and just gets sort of moved over to OP Mainnet. Technically, the entity that controls that is the Optimism Foundation, is not OP Labs, but we work super closely together to align, what we're building and make sure that we are leveraging those resources in the form of income, like one, to get paid and go build sort of the vision of what Optimism is, but also just like to align ecosystem actors. When we talk about shared security, one of the ways we talk about that, the benefits are, is that you have all of these L2s, which now have like massive throughput. I mean, Base does the most throughput of any L2 by far, and arguably like is a top 3 blockchain, maybe top 2 blockchain overall by throughput. If you're Unichain, for example, you get all the downstream benefits of like the battle testedness that Base has sort of run ahead and pioneered. You have a ton of confidence that that code is super secure because Base is securing, 15, 18 billion, something like that in terms of assets on chain. So there's just a lot of confidence that gets built up with all of these various folks running the same stack, but for slightly different use cases and at slightly different scales. So we call that shared security because it's like you can have a ton of confidence that this stuff is secure by nature of just like how windy it's become because of all these folks running it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Linux is kind of the same concept. It just doesn't have the same economic. I mean, it does have the same economic thing because like there are many trillions of dollars built on top of Linux in economic value. It just doesn't have a blockchain like automating revenue streams and stuff like that. I'm pretty curious. What does the OP mainnet though have to do from a technology or product standpoint with all the other chains? Like, what service is it providing? Like, I get that you guys need to have revenue to pay for the development, right?
Yeah.
But there's got to be some incentive to like from a technology and product standpoint that they want to connect to OP mainnet.
There is. Let me talk a little bit about like philosophy of Marside, and then I'll talk about a specific use case of OP Mainnet. Philosophy of Marside is we're not here to make OP Mainnet, a top chain by any metric. We're here to enable our partners, Base, World Chain, Unichain, Inc., Sonium, and many, many more to be as successful as possible. So we don't like think about growth or success internally in terms of like how much TVL or like how much revenue do we make from OP Mainnet. All of our goals are very much our partners' goals. Like whatever they need to win, we go do that. So our success is really defined through them. OP Mainnet then has 2 goals. One, it is a proving ground for technology. It is a way for us to showcase the OP stack and various things that it can do, again, so folks can have confidence in it. We're not always running the exact same configuration, say, as Base or as Inc. And that allows us to like test certain features and then give Base, Inc., Sony, whoever it is, confidence that those features, work well in production. So we think of OP Mainnet as a showcase for the OP stack, showcase for our technology. The second thing is not everyone needs to go straight to chain. A great example of this sort of like graduation path is WorldChain. WorldChain started as WorldCoin on OP Mainnet. And once WorldCoin got big enough where it was actually consuming the vast majority of gas on OP Mainnet, once they had built up enough users, sort of just like distribution generally, they migrated to their own OP stack chain, which is WorldChain today. So we definitely aim to keep OP Mainnet operating at a very healthy level of users, assets, sort of turnover, throughput, et cetera, so that it is this credibly neutral launching pad for folks to come in and say, hey, I'm not ready for a chain. I need to launch, some use case on chain. I think I might want to graduate to a chain in a year or two if I'm successful. The OP stack is super intriguing. I'm going to start by launching on OP Mainnet because that is the technology that I will use to run my own chain in the future. And now I have this well-trodden graduation path I can follow, just like WorldChain and others have already done, to run my own chain in the future.
So are these fees enforced then via like a license, like a open source license that has a fee built into it, or like how is that structure? Because it really does sound like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it's nice to have a proving ground. It's a shared resource, but it doesn't sound like these chains, they're independent. Like they don't really come back to OP Mainnet. And so there's not a technology or product incentive other than they get resources like product innovation and things like that. I get that. But yeah, is it like, how is that, or is it just like, that's just, they're doing it altruistically? I mean, what's the model?
I definitely think it is more of the former, almost like like a Red Hat Enterprise Linux type model
Yeah.
would be a way
There is a
to go
license.
internally.
There is kind of a licensing agreement, and it's like, hey, that's actually pretty cool. So it's not on the open source side. It's literally like Red Hat. It's literally like a subscription fee almost. It's just in the form of a rev share.
Yeah, so let me be like a little more specific. There's maybe like two ways you can think of running a chain using the OP stack. The OP stack itself, MIT licensed, fully open source. You can just go pick it up and run a chain.
Easy.
Blast does this today. OPBNB does this today. We really don't have a ton of relationship with them, except occasionally answering some questions, maybe helping them through an upgrade, something like that. But for the most part, they pick up a stack, they go run their own chain. Then you have the Superchain, which is more of like this Red Hat licensing thing, where we are very, very active in supporting our partners' bespoke needs. And so typically this is large enterprises that have like very specific ways they either need to tailor or customize or run the stack. And we will go in there and help them achieve those. And then we'll also deploy other resources we have to help them grow their chain in the Superchain ecosystem itself. In the sort of medium and long term, we have a lot of specific vision around how the superchain will interop together so that some of this liquidity can become much more shared, much more fungible, much more available to folks. So it's much easier to launch a chain and leverage, for example, liquidity that might already exist on OP Mainnet. But right now, all of our value prop is strictly around like, we're going to come in here to make you successful by doing whatever you need in the stack to sort of like, achieve your business goals.
Cool. And so it's sort of like a hybrid between, with like having a mainnet that builders can build on. They don't have to fork over any money really. They could just come over there and build, and they don't have to manage the infrastructure or know how to deploy it or anything like that. They just have to know Solidity, right? And like how to wire up a user experience. Then if they get big enough and and they raise money or whatever it is, like, then they have a need, like a real need to have their own network. Then they can do that. And so are there like knobs, like for WorldCoin, WorldChain, like, are there knobs that they have more ability to turn those knobs to like customize how it works? For example, gas, right? Like, can they just make it gasless? So they don't worry
Totally.
about that.
Yeah, World's a great example. So one of the really cool features they've built out is what they call priority block space for humans. So anytime using World IDs, which are on chain, anytime a block gets built, what they're going to do is they're going to prioritize humans and they're going to put them top of block. And WorldChain actually pays for the gas for those transactions as well. So if you are like an ARB doing something on chain, you're kind of in a tough spot in World because you're always going to get slotted in after all of the human transactions, and you've got to pay for your own gas. And this is just one of like many modifications that chains can and have made to the OP stack. What's great is all of that is open source and becomes available to others that may want to follow suit, or tweak that a little bit. But yeah, basically, like, we talk about the OP stack being as modular as possible. We try to open up as many knobs, levers, dials as possible. So folks, one, can just like pull on these things to customize their chains as needed. But also if they need to go in there and do something a little deeper, do something that's like brand new, that's also very easy for them. And that's where we'll step in to support as well.
Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting for me to hear you talk about the model because my company, BK Labs, our why that company is just built together. We believe open source software is the purest form of innovation and the greatest legacy we can leave to the world professionally. And my partner is this guy named Brian Fox. He co-authored the GPL licenses, wrote Bash back in the day, and we've done a bunch of R&D because coming from the Solana ecosystem, we've done a bunch of R&D on every validator client on Solana, and we built this thing called SVM Kit that allows you to spin up your own fork of Solana in like 90 seconds. It's something that would take like an engineer like weeks to figure out, like even a good one that knows blockchain stuff. It's going to take them a long time. And so with this, you can spin it up 90 seconds, any infrastructure you want, GCP, AWS, bare metal. And I've been thinking about the model for doing something kind of like this, like a Red Hat style support model. And we do have a couple customers who are building like all L1s. But the big challenge for us, and this is why we've done a bunch of R&D on the validator side, the client side, has been that it's a mono repo. And when you start trying to change things. Like even just saying like instead of a different gas token, right, is like kind of difficult. Or messing with consensus is there's a lot of you need a lot of expertise, and so we know our way around the code, and so we can do that. So we're kind of like OP Labs in that way. And we actually have a vision for like, and this would be longer term, and we need decent funding, but to make the validator client modular, similar to what like happened with Linux. Linux was a mono repo, and then it became more modular over time. And for the exact reason, like you guys built from the ground up, kind of that way, and that was I think that was a good decision. I don't think that the way that Solana was built was a bad decision. I think we've been extremely successful, right, in getting to market and dominating sort of like the mono chain thesis. And I think, I actually I had Mark, the CEO of Polygon Labs, on yesterday, and we had this exact same conversation. And like, I think that people just really underestimate the TAM for blockchains. Like I still believe you're going to have 5 that are huge, and Solana is going to be probably the biggest of those 5 in Ethereum, right? They're going to be battling for that. But you will still have like thousands, probably at least, of other chains. And yeah, they won't be making trillions in revenue, but they'll still be making billions in revenue, and have reasons to exist.
I agree with so much of what you just said. First off, I love the why for BK Labs and open source software. I think we strongly align with that vision that just like open source software compounds value for people that produce it, the people that leverage it in ways that are like hard necessarily to comprehend. And sometimes business models can be challenging around them, but at the same time, like there's clear value created in open source software. And that sort of gives you the right to monetize or do interesting business stuff with it in the future. What we found in particular is that as you sort of move from like startup to enterprise, there's some spectrum there, right? And as you move to like larger and larger companies, they tend to be more willing to pay for enterprise level support. They need it. That's also just like they're accustomed to buying that. So I think those sorts of licensing deals are just much more natural as you get to the larger and larger customers versus like a startup. Like, we can just do this on our own. Also, we don't have 60 million users that we need to take care of in the same way today. So that's one thing that's sort of leading us in that direction. And maybe just to sort of like pile on in that, we definitely believe that the vast majority of large enterprises and financial institutions are going to run their own blockchain in the future. There are so many analogies in my career in financial services infrastructure. Previously, I worked at an equities custodian, and actually Robinhood launched on that equities custodian. It's called Apex Clearing. So they started working with Apex in 2012. They eventually launched in 2014, and they eventually got big enough where they were like, we need to vertically integrate and own our infrastructure. There's enough margin, there's enough like UX that we can provide to our customers to just make this massive investment and own all the way sort of like soup to nuts how we build Robinhood. Today, what we're seeing is like Robinhood, but many other fintechs and crypto exchanges as well are saying, we need to launch products on chain. There are a ton of reasons to do that. And as they move their massive distribution, all of their users and all of their assets on chain, eventually they're like, wow, we should not necessarily be paying Ethereum validators or Solana validators. There's margin there for us. We should vertically, integrate and own our infrastructure. And so we feel quite confident that we're going to live in a world with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of blockchains. Most folks won't know it. A lot of them will just be L2s on Ethereum, and it'll just all feel like everyone will just call that Ethereum. But you might be on, Base, you might be on Robinhood chain, you might be on, FinTech ADC chain or like JP Morgan chain or something like that. They're all going to have reasons to own their own infrastructure and customize that to their specific customer and business needs. And that's a lot of where we're going with our vision for Optimism.
So one of my sort of qualms with the whole L2 space is just the centralization of the sequencers. And everybody acknowledges that's a problem, and not part of the ethos of Ethereum, right? And Ethereum's like max decentralization, but it's slow and expensive, right? And how do you think about that? Like, I don't even know the roadmap anymore. I just know it's kind of taken a while. And frankly, like, I don't really care about what the market is doing. I just care about the product, right, and the technology, and that it's, I don't pay attention to the token price really at all. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm happy Ethereum's up, Solana's up. Like, none of that matters to me. It's like I'm here again. I just build together, right? Like the ideals of like getting to the place, the destination that I think everybody shares. And so I'm curious. How do you look at that from I don't know, long-term vision standpoint and where we are today and where you think it goes? Does it become decentralized, or is it really just like going to be these corporations running centralized sequencers to Ethereum? And like, what does that mean? How do I think about that?
So there's maybe two ways we think about it. The second will be the spicier one. The first is we always want to provide escape hatches that are fully decentralized to anyone that is operating on an Optimism L2. And so what this means is you can always on Ethereum, which let's just call decentralized and permissionless and like available to anyone in the world. Of course, this is like a stuck term, but like let's just assume Ethereum is that for a second. To get onto any
reasonably all of those things. I think for sure Solana is reasonably all of those things too.
Totally. Totally agree.
A lot of nitpicking that goes on crypto Twitter that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think the majority of people care about.
I agree. Or like, there's a L2 Beat, for example, sort of has a framework by which they work through the security and risk of L2s. And I ask folks a lot, I'm like, did you look at L2 Beat before you bridged over? And the answer is always no. It's a very small set of folks that are deep in the weeds thinking about this stuff. And it's great to have them shine the light on how L2s work. But I don't think that's how most consumers think about bridging to base, for example. Okay, so first thing is always has to be an escape hatch, because that is sort of like, it's like the threat of self-custody with your Bitcoin, for example. As long as I can take my Bitcoin off Coinbase or wherever I'm holding it, then Coinbase has to provide some product that is still like useful to me, knowing that I have this self-custody alternative. So what that means for an OP Stack L2 is that you can always go on Ethereum and send a transaction from Ethereum into the L2 to do whatever you want up there. So even though there is a centralized sequencer, even though that sequencer potentially could censor you or something like that, you can always work through Ethereum. And that is how every default OP Stack chain works today. And if you ever want to check
how does that work? Like if it doesn't go through the sequencer, can you walk me through that?
Yeah.
And
good question.
I'm just curious.
So the state of an L2 is actually maintained on Ethereum. And this is so that the L2 can inherit all the security, decentralization, permissionless properties that Ethereum already has. So if that state is on Ethereum, one way you can alter that state is you can go talk to the OP Mainnet sequencer, and it will, batch up a bunch of transactions and compress them, and then put that into, L1, so that we have like the next set of state transfers to happen there. But because it's on Ethereum, you can also just do it on Ethereum, basically, is the simplest way to think of it. Think of Ethereum as just like where the state of the L2 lives. And so you can go straight to the source.
State, and because the state is essentially, there's like a way to access with your OP Stack wallet. You can say, I am the owner of this state of these assets.
That's literally exactly it. Like you can withdraw your assets
on mainnet, and because you do that, then like later it might take a while because there's like settlement times and stuff like that or whatever that I'm aware of, and I don't know the details on that, but I know it can be a long time. But anyway, regardless, you can do that, and there's probably like open source front ends and things like that you could do that through.
Exactly.
And then the sequencer still updates everything, even though you didn't act through the sequencer. It's still just reading the state off the chain. That's how it works.
That's pretty much exactly it. A lot of details in there, but suffice to say that like anything you want to get done on an L2, you can go to Ethereum and do that on Ethereum. And
what if the sequencer is totally down? What if the sequencer is totally down?
Can just do it on Ethereum.
Yeah, it's literally just on Ethereum.
Exactly. And so
if the sequencer's down, then like people who try to use the interfaces that are connected to the sequencer are just not going to be able to do that. It's like just not working at that point. But on a mainnet, you still have whatever the state was before that ended, before like the gate closed, essentially. Yeah. And you can still, that makes a lot of sense.
This is the escape hatch. And so as long as you trust Ethereum to be, decentralized, permissionless, or like whatever properties you care about, that escape hatch exists. The benefit of the sequencer is that now you have a centralized entity that can go max on UX, speed, throughput, whatever you want, so that I submit a transaction, I get it back right away, and I know that it's included in the block and on the L2 and all that. We think that is what's necessary for like Base to build out more products in the Coinbase app that use stuff on Base. That way I'm getting like a great Web2 experience. But at the same time, you always have this escape hatch, which sort of forces good behavior on the sequencers, the corporations running these sequencers, because if they're not behaving well, then everyone's just going to go around them to accomplish whatever they want. My spicier take here is that the market does not seem to validate, like the market doesn't seem to care about centralized sequencers. Base is just like an example we can keep talking about. Like they're growing rampantly. And like I said, I don't think most folks are like checking L2Beat or others to be like, oh, this is a centralized sequencer. I'm worried about that. I think most folks trust Coinbase. If they start to misbehave, then I think we're going to hear about it.
I definitely
pick up on it
here on the spectrum of paranoid.
Yeah.
Who have been doing like, but that's because I work in the space. I've been doing this since 2016. So I'm like fully educated.
Totally.
And look, and I use Coinbase sometimes. Yeah, like I don't leave money there ever, just because I don't leave money on centralized exchanges. Especially after the last decade. But I don't have anything against the platform. And think for like retail, it's fine.
I agree, and I think the way that we
just now, I really I like the escape hatch that exists, because it just makes sense to me that needs to be there. All right, so you've got me up to speed kind of on like how everything works. Where are we in the state of optimism, and where are we going?
Yeah, great question. The state of optimism today is where we're super excited about our current ecosystem of partners. We've got a whole host of folks doing like super interesting things that we're excited to keep leaning into and keep supporting. Where we think we're going is, we think the world is enterprise adoption via DeFi Mullets, where lots and lots of fintechs, exchanges, financial institutions see a ton of benefit to launching products that just look and feel like me earning yield in whatever app I'm using, whether that's a Fidelity app or a Nubank app or a whoever.
Yeah, a lot.
But what it is under the hood is that is all DeFi. And we think as those folks realize all the benefits they get to launching products via DeFi Mullets, they're eventually going to, come to the conclusion of like, I should run my own chain, because there's just monetary benefits to that as well. And so we're super excited for the sort of like enterprise finance on-chain movement that we think we're, at the early onset of right now, and helping to support all of those folks. One, just to get their first on-chain products launched. And then two, if it makes sense for them to graduate to their own chain, we'll be there to help them do that as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I really like the model. I have like an enterprise bent myself, and so I gravitate towards that kind of sales process. And I see a lot of what you're saying just checks out. And impressed with where it's gone. So like on the product side, what are you most excited about right now? And how do you even think about product? Because you've got the sequencer, and it has a bunch of knobs you can turn for functionality. That's a product. But there's also like wallets and dexes and trading stuff and like tools like that need to ship out of the box, even with UIs.
Totally.
So that it gets big, like super fast. How do you manage that? And what are the things that are like priorities that ship with the, if WorldCoin decides to ship their world chain, what's just like sort of part of the package?
Yeah. It's a great question. It is a tough world to think about product in. Our customers ostensibly are folks that pay us money to run chains, Kraken with Ink, Sony with Sonium, et cetera. But like, we also have customers that are people deploying apps on those chains. And we work very closely with a whole host of them as well. And so we've got a whole like range of sort of who our customers are. I would say we have 3 priorities going forward. One, we want to provide solutions for enterprise folks trying to come on chain. We don't want to have to force them to run their own chain or think about all the complexities and sort of like deploying the DeFi mullet. We want to help package that up so it is as simple as possible. It's already a big deal to make the leap into crypto. We want to make sure sort of like the technology and product aspects of them making that decision and moving on chain is as simple as possible. And so we have a lot of work happening to sort of just build solutions for large financial institutions to say like, I'm going to deploy my first DeFi mullet product. The second is we want to be the best infrastructure for those products, the best chain infrastructure in particular. So this is about making the chains as fast, as cheap as possible, and then giving all the right knobs and levers and dials, customizations to those enterprises that they need. Trust and security is obviously really big there, but there's a whole bunch of customizations and just like bespoke things that enterprises care about that like the last generation of chain operators may not have cared about. We need to make sure that our product supports all of that for them. And then the third ongoing for us, I talked a little about this earlier, interop. today the Superchain is not a Superchain. It is a bunch of independent L2s that happen to just run the same software and have like roughly similar configuration and sort of like direction in terms of where they're going and in terms of the stack they're running. We want to help them be much more interoperable so that liquidity users just can move together much more freely in there. And there's a clear network effect that accrues to everyone building into Superchain. We think this like network effect should exist across crypto, by the way. It's not meant to be bespoke to the Superchain. It's just where we have the most leverage today to build. But I would hope that that interoperability can extend to Solana, L1, other blockchains in the future as well, so that users and assets can just move as quickly and freely together. That's sort of like how we think about our product priorities at the highest level. Obviously a lot of detail in there, but hopefully that was helpful.
No, that is super helpful. And I think you guys are doing it the right way. We're getting towards the top of the show, and I always ask this same question. What have I not asked you that I should have asked?
Great question, by the way. Why am I so excited about enterprises? It is a little of a different bent on sort of like the cypherpunk.
I mean, I know why you are, right? Because I'm excited about it too, but yeah, tell me.
I think when you look at the largest fintech apps, the largest, financial institutions in the world, Fidelity has over trillions in assets. There is so much, let's just call it distribution for a second. But what I mean by distribution is users and assets that a few of these, logos, enterprises can control and can move around. And I think the most like impactful lever we have to move net new users and net new assets on chain is very likely through those enterprises. So if we can pill them on, hey, the best products I can offer to my customers are actually DeFi Mullets, and then like, hey, I should invest more in sort of controlling, owning, whatever, just leveraging the benefits of crypto rails versus archaic, financial rails. That's going to be the most effective way we just onboard trillions more in assets, hundreds of millions, maybe billions more in users. And so I'm super excited to hopefully push that forward.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I've enjoyed having this conversation. Would love to circle back in like 6 months and just check in on where things are, have you back on again.
Let's do it. Alex, this is super fun. Thanks for the questions.